Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens, the screenwriting step-by-step project, episode 208, session 208. My name is Glenn Gers, and I come to you every Monday through Friday, if I can make it, at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, to let you look over my shoulder, share my screen as I write a script. I do this especially on Thursdays, accompanied by my neighbor's gardener, who I am sure you have been hearing. I do this in order to demystify the process of writing a script. The process, the day-to-day, line-by-line, working and reworking of the words on the page. I am not talking about writing a great script. I am not talking about writing a script that will sell. I'm talking about getting a script written, because I think there's lots of people who talk about how to make a script great and very few who talk about how to actually get the script written so that it can be great. So that's what I'm here to do. And the way I'm doing it is I'm going to let you watch me walk through it, because I have been doing it for a long time. And this is the technique that I figured out for myself in a 25-year career writing TV and movies. I had to teach myself because there was no YouTube. There were very few screenwriting books when I started out back in the 1980s. And I thought, a lot of the stuff that I figured out for myself, I bet it would help other people to see these tricks and techniques. It's not a big system. You don't have to watch all of them. You don't have to watch them in order. You don't have to watch any of them. Honestly, the main thing you have to do is figure out what's good for you. And I'm just trying to show you some stuff that I think is good in case it will be good for you. You have to figure out the way that works for you, what makes you productive, what gets the ideas out of your head and onto the page. Whatever that is, if it's healthy and you can afford it, do that. If you are interested in my grander theories about what makes a script good and a lot of other stuff about how to be a writer, you can find it here on my channel in the first 3 playlists on my channel page. You'll see the first one is called Screenwriting Essentials, then Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and then The Process, Being a Writer. And this is where I've tried to make a lot of 10-minute lessons where I boil down everything I know about the subject, and the subject is always right there on the thumbnail in big, colorful words so that you can just say, oh, that's what I want to learn about, into little techniques and steps and lessons that I think are practical. That is really my goal, just to give you some tips and tools and tricks that may be practical on your journey, because yours is going to be yours. Everybody's is different. Hi, Larry. So today we have a big lesson, because what I've been doing is I started writing this. All I had was a vague idea. I slowly, over months, worked up an outline. That's the first, I don't know how many, 50, 60 episodes of this thing. Then I wrote a rough draft. And now I've been polishing that rough draft for the past couple of months now, taking a scene at a time, trying to figure out which scenes work, which scenes are not doing what I thought they would. And then this week, I got the first couple of pages to where they were good, like actual, readable, someone else could see this thing and I wouldn't be cringing, good. Just the first 2 pages. That's all I got this good. I mean, there's some sections later that are going to be good. But right now, I was just going through from the beginning and trying to solve the problem of the first scene. And I did. It took a lot of work to figure out what... I had too much going on. I had to kill some darlings and move some stuff around. And I got it right. And then I started to move on to the next scene. And a little alarm bell went off in my head, which was, it's too long. There's just too many things happening, too many words. It takes too long. Hi, Jean. And I am vulnerable to this problem of trying to cram too much into a scene, of letting a speech or a character go on too long. So what I did here, I wanted to talk about this essential idea, which is, here, let me show you what I did today. I went to read the next section, just to rough in some rough dialogue for the next section of this speech. If you remember, here's the speech, okay? Here we go. Boom. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. So I got this whole first page down, and then George goes. It's George recording his podcast. So he gives this speech, which draws you into the case that he's following. Hi, I write. And then I have him stop and go off to get some food so that when he comes back, he can eat the food and get poisoned and die, and then the story starts. So I was thinking about, I don't know if you remember, but the past couple of days I've been talking about how important it is not to show every step of any process. Almost never. Unless it's going to be some kind of showpiece where you're showing, and even then, I mean, like if you think about like Iron Man building, Tony Stark building the Iron Man suit, they skip a lot of steps. They don't actually show you every step. They just show you the snazzy parts. That is what almost every script has to do in almost every scene, is just find the parts that are most interesting and active and dramatic, and then you try and cut away the rest of the true to life steps. Okay, so hi Kirby. So I began to get this pretty readable. It was moving. I was dropping some steps. For instance, I showed him going out of his backyard and going into the kitchen to get the food, and then I cut out the scene in the kitchen where he gets the food, because you just show him with the food, and then we must have gotten it. Okay, so then he comes back and he starts to listen to a playback of what he's recorded that day, so we're getting more of information, while he eats his soup, and then he dies. Here's the thing. We're now on to page 3. And I know that's just too much. Too long a speech. Too long a sequence. And the thing I know you're going to ask me is, how do you know? How does one know? And this is a really fair question, because I'm saying, a little alarm bell went off my head, and I think, for you guys, I know either the alarm bell never goes off or it goes off all the time and you can't trust it. So the question is, how do you know? And here's the answer. You can't know when you're a beginner. You just can't. There's a lot of stuff that you can only know by experience. When you've written 10 scripts, you begin to know what does and doesn't play, what does and doesn't pass the readers in the business. There's a whole lot of stuff that you just learn by doing. You cannot know this stuff unless you actually do it. So that is unfortunately the lesson. I try to put it in the most positive light, because the thing is, even when you are a skilled professional, there's things you can't know yet because you haven't done X, Y, or Z. You haven't done a bigger budget, or you haven't worked with whatever it is. There's always something you don't know, so you just have to do the best you can so you can learn it. That is the secret. You do the best you can so you can learn it. Okay? That is my secret. Okay. Oh, good, Hunter. I'm glad you watched it. Yeah. I will tell you that in a bit. I'm in the midst of a lesson right now, so I'm going to try and get to this, because this is a big point, which is, having read this and I got this scene. Now, if this scene ended here, if this speech was a page and a half, that is extreme, but it's kind of snazzy and interesting and fine. The problem becomes that he then stops, goes away, and the speech starts up again. Yes, he's listening and not speaking, but it doesn't matter. It's like, and I have done this before, and it has been a mistake, and I always thought I could get away with it. And the only way I learned I couldn't get away with it was by actually doing it, because I kept thinking, no, this will work. And the opening of Mad Money has a montage of this YouTube, not Mad Money, Like, Share, Follow. The opening of Like, Share, Follow starts with a montage of this YouTuber's work. You get to see his YouTube channel and what kind of stuff he does, which is great. It's an introduction to the character. Then we get to the story starting, which is that he has hit a certain high point. He's got a lot of viewers. And then I showed the production of one of his episodes. So that's 3 introductions. And I thought they kind of flowed together. And when we were editing it, I realized they don't. It's just too many introductions. I kind of trimmed it down and made it work as best I could because each one of the parts was vital. I could not get rid of them. But in writing in the future, I needed to remember you can't have 3 steps of introduction in a row. We get tired of introductions. We want to get into the story. So that was the lesson I had. And the thing I think that you guys can take away from this, hello, Natasha, is that you never stop stepping back and asking questions. Oh, questions. I got the wrong one there. There's a, hang on a second. Boom. I corrected that. Hang on. There we go. Questions. That's better. Okay, so you never stop stepping back and asking questions. This is what writing is. It's not like you are going to, you get it right and then you're just cleaning it up. Yes, down the line kind of, but honestly, even when you've got a polished draft, you will still be amazed. You'll show it to people or other factors will come in and you'll have to step back and think, how do I restructure this or completely rethink this character or cut, there's once where I cut a main character out of the script entirely. So the thing that you have to learn is sometimes you have to get a scene right to realize the scene should not exist. This is a weird lesson, but honestly, it's true. Sometimes you can't recognize that the that the problem is the scene itself until you've solved it, until you've got it to read really well. And when it reads really well, you say to yourself, "Wow, I have just made a good thing that should not be there." That is what I recognize today. This scene, this whole sequence, should not be there. And I will get to what it should be in a second. But first, let me take a second to answer Hunter's question about Christopher McDonald. Christopher McDonald was wonderful. He plays a small part in Mad Money. He's actually, I have to tell you, everyone on that shoot was very nice to me. Some were nicer than others, but no one was not nice. Christopher McDonald and I didn't talk a lot. He was only there for a day or two. And he was fantastic. He did a great job with a pretty thankless part. He did it because I believe Callie Curry, the director, had written one of his best roles, which was the role in Thelma and Louise, where he played the jerky husband. And so they had a relationship, and I think she said, "Can you come and do this kind of thankless part?" And he was like, "Sure." But he's also phenomenal in Hacks, by the way. Anyway, so what was it like working with Christopher McDonald? He was a doll. He did a great job with I didn't have to rewrite anything. I didn't have to work on figuring out how to solve a problem for him. He just found the role, found the center of the role, played it, went on. Okay, so now let us get to this issue, which is, I'm not even going to make that question. I just made this note. Here's the deal. Okay. This scene in which George gives his speech introducing himself and his quest, which is going to kill him, we're spending a lot of time getting to know George. And then, we reveal his sort of spooky, impressive podcasting persona. And then he reveals that he's kind of actually a failure. And then he walks across the yard to get some food, and then he's eating the food, and we're learning more about his podcast, and then he dies. Here's the problem. It's too many steps. The truth is, that you just don't care, that we don't need to know that much about George. We're spending too much about George. The truth is, George could never be in. I thought one of the things we could do is we could just start with George being dead. We could start with the body being found. That was one of the thoughts I had. Said, what if we just start with the discovery of the body? And then I decided that that's probably not as good, because the thing is, I do want to show some of the podcast, and I do want to get that information in that first speech. So therefore, I think that what I was sort of picturing was, what if he died while listening to the playback? So the playback was just running on loop, and it was there, and like 2 days later, somebody finds the body. That doesn't really help us. So the thing I think we can do, though, is instead of having him, here's the thing I was thinking, okay, we need to show A, that he's a cool podcaster, then show B, he's not a cool podcaster, C, to show that he's eating and gets poisoned. And I realized, well, why can't he just be eating when he's doing the podcast? Like the first one. Why can't he just die right then? And he can, the thing I want, that I do want to keep, is this moment of this dark, beautiful studio being revealed by the garage door going up as the inside of his garage. He could do that when he's dying. As he's dying, he stumbles and he hits the switch and it opens and he falls and he dies right there. That's it. That's all we need. This whole rest of this sequence, we just don't need. So that's it. That's where I got to, and now that's what I'm going to have to rewrite now. Also, screenplays are not required to use fade-in. One thing I would urge you to do, all of you, is read screenplays. Read a lot of screenplays, because the more you read, the better you write. This is just a fact. If you want to be a writer of any kind, the more you read, the better you write. And obviously, you should be reading some of the art form that you want to write, because that's how you get good at it. One of the main ways you get good at anything is by engaging in that thing, which means practicing it, doing it, but also take art apart. This is the name of one of my videos. I urge you to check it out, because I talk about the idea that you should read scripts. I talk about how to find them and where to define which ones are worth reading, because some of them are transcripts and not worth reading. But you should be reading a lot of different scripts. You should be reading as many different kinds. First of all, anything that you have liked, or frankly, anything that you have hated, you should try and find the script of it out there on the internet. You'll be surprised how many there are, especially now. Anything that's up for an award, they publish the script on the internet. Well, what they do is they publish the script to the industry, and people in the industry throw it on the internet. But you will find that. Anyway, read them. The first thing you'll do is you'll learn all the different ways that they can be written, because there are many, many, many different styles of screenwriting. So the answer is, are you required to use fade-in? Absolutely not. Okay. If George is giving a cue to his murder in his podcast that will pay off later, then his podcast would be necessary. It is necessary. I agree. What I'm saying is, it's not necessary to see it twice. That's where I failed. That is where I did it. The idea that we see his podcast is very necessary. The idea that he stops, goes and gets something to eat, and then we see his podcast again. That's the problem. That's the thing that I was like, wait a second. He could just be eating or drinking. He just has to be drinking. He just has to be drinking something, because that's the whole point, is that he's poisoned. That's all we need to see. Okay. I tried to read Shakespeare. I stopped reading it because it made my head hurt. I think he may have had a mental thing wrong with his head. No, he lived in the 1690s, and they talked differently then. That's what it is. Shakespeare worked perfectly fine for his time. And the importance of Shakespeare is partly that so many other writers and cultural figures and people read Shakespeare. Shakespeare is an excellent playwright for his time. Like, there's a lot of things about him that are inaccessible now. However, there is a lot to be learned from Shakespeare. But one of the main reasons you want to know Shakespeare is simply because Shakespeare influenced many, many other work. For instance, Succession right now on HBO, up for a bunch of Emmys now, and have won a bunch of Emmys. It is very much influenced by King Lear, one of Shakespeare's best plays. Anyway, so the answer about Shakespeare is simply, first of all, see if you can watch Shakespeare. Shakespeare wasn't written to be read. He was written to be performed. But second of all, recognize that people are talking in poetry. Everyone had someone unalive. I'm talking about where pretty much every play had someone unalive. You mean like ghosts, like in Hamlet? Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, right now, everyone has someone with a superpower. Anyway, here's the deal about Shakespeare. Yes, it is inaccessible to us because the language is unfamiliar. The thing you should try to do is, first of all, see that there are adaptations not in Shakespearean language, which is interesting because one of the important things about Shakespeare is his stories became primal stories to Western culture. And frankly, even others. There's a famous Yojimbo, I believe, is a famous version of Macbeth by Akira Kurosawa, the Japanese director, in which he transferred the story of Macbeth to feudal Japan. Shakespeare is not the be-all and end-all. He's a good writer. He's had a huge influence. That does not mean that you need to know Shakespeare. But if you are, and this, I have to say this over and over again, this is really important. The more you read, the better you write. And if all you do is like spend some time, and there are classes and things where they'll help you to understand Shakespeare. The point about Shakespeare partly is he had no scenery. Okay? He had there was nothing there except the actors and the words. So what's cool about Shakespeare is that everything is in the words. Now, that's unusual. It's artificial to our way of thinking because we're used to seeing, like, if somebody is in a spooky place, you'll just see the spooky place and they'll say, damn, I'm scared. That's all you need. What Shakespeare had to do was have the people say to each other or to the audience, wow, it's dark, there's fog, and the way he said that was often really nice. Often not, but Shakespeare, I should probably just do a Shakespeare moment some other time. Anyway, the whole point about Shakespeare is, A, he's getting everything into the language. And so some basic forms of expression are created there. He wasn't the only one. There were people doing this since Greek theater. There's people doing this in all sorts of plays. But it's a valuable thing to learn. And also, the other thing that's really, really great about Shakespeare is he writes some great stories with great characters. And it's worth trying to understand what those are. Even if it, like I said, it's an adapted version, or if it's just a summary, it's still worth knowing that stuff. And at very worst, learn some of the poetry of the language. Sometimes, like, there's a great speech in Macbeth, the famous Tomorrow and Tomorrow speech. Oh, is that true? Is it Ron? Was it not you, Jimbo? Okay. All right. I will take your word for that. Anyway, the point about this is there's towards the end of Macbeth, things are going very badly for Macbeth. and he is basically facing utter existential despair. And he makes this speech, which is just to himself. It's to the audience. It's just his feelings. It's brilliant. There are so many things, like moments like that. There's some stuff in King Lear. I mean, I love King Lear. Hamlet is fascinating because it breaks all of the rules of screenwriting and yet is a great story. And so one of the things that I think would be cool to see is to watch screenwriting teachers twist themselves out of shape trying to make that into the paradigm script with the 3 acts and the rising, falling actions and whatever it is they believe is the ultimate story. Hamlet is a weird structure and a weird story, but it's cool. Anyway, that's what I was going to say. All right, so let me move on. Hunter, I'm going to get to this in a second. Boop, boop. Let me just grab a shot of that. Okay. Okay. Any struggle? You know, yes and no. I mean, frankly, Joel Coen's Macbeth is great, but it's still Shakespeare. It's still very Shakespeare-y. You know. Okay. And yes, there may have been several Shakespeares. I am not one for knowing much about the betrayal and attempted unaliving. Yeah, most of that. I mean, the guy was trying to sell tickets. You know, he was trying to tell stories about grand emotions. So he was not of the school of let's talk about kitchen sink stuff. He was saying, I want to talk about large emotional actions among usually royalty. Yeah, if you actually want to understand the words, there are lots of texts where they try and explain what it is, because the language is just unfamiliar. It's 300 or 400-year-old language. It's just unfamiliar. Don't even try to read Chaucer then. Yes, yeah, he did. You know, and some of the comedies are really cool, and some are kind of in between. Measure for Measure is weird. Measure for Measure is sort of this very dark comedy. Okay, yeah. There's lots of good, and some of Branagh's stuff, and you know, I don't know. There's lots of good. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Mel Gibson's Hamlet is kind of interesting in some ways. There's also a lot of good films of stage productions, and seriously, that's a cool thing to see. All right. So very briefly, before we get into this, Hunter has asked me a lot of questions. I'm going to answer them very quickly. The difference between a polished draft and a spec script, there is no difference. They're two different, and a polished draft is simply a draft that you have rewritten. A spec script means a script you have written without being paid. They're simply completely different. A spec script is any script you have written that is written on speculation. In other words, you're betting that someone will want it. This term was created when almost all movies were written by contract writers in movie studios. So it was kind of a weird thing to write a spec script because usually you just worked for the studio and they said, write this, write that. You did it. Okay. How many spec scripts should a screenwriter have before trying to pitch to a producer? Well, you know, first of all, pitching to a producer is not a thing. I mean, they will let you, there are conferences and conventions where they have pitch sessions where you pitch. Maybe 1 in a billion of those does someone actually get anywhere. Pitching originally was a thing that happened with people who were already in the industry. And when they were recognized and represented and had credits and had proved themselves as good writers, they would go to a producer and say, before I write this, I'm going to tell you the story. If you think it's a good story, pay me to write it. That was what a pitch was. It was a way of saying, if you want me to write this, hire me. Pitching for outsiders who have never written a script before or have never been paid for writing a script to pitch to a company is a thing. It's a publicity stunt contest done by places like conventions, they're lovely. It's a lovely experience to hear the response of a person in the industry to your idea. But honestly, it's a terrible idea. It's a terrible way to judge work. Most of the people who are doing these pitch things are not in positions of power. You don't want to pitch to a producer. You want to write the script and give it to a producer and have them read it. But the answer is still how many spec scripts should a screenwriter have? As many as possible. Just keep writing them. There's never a stopping point of how many spec scripts should you have. That is what you are going to do for the rest of your career if you are a screenwriter. You're going to be writing spec scripts, or you're going to be working on staffs, or you're going to be hired for things. But most of the time, even if you're writing on a staff, you're going to be writing spec scripts. Writing spec scripts means being a writer, being a screenwriter. That's all that means. Okay. Okay. Yes, Othello is fantastic. Othello is wonderful. I have not read the screenplay of Goodfellas. Okay. Just wondering, what do you think about writing a spin-off TV pilot before the original pilot has gotten off the ground? If it's good, the spin-off might become the one that sells, and the other one would become the spin-off. That's all I can think of. I mean, the answer is I'm never going to say don't write something. I would say if you're writing a spin-off that doesn't stand independently, first of all, it's a bad series no matter what. A spin-off still has to stand independently. Better Call Saul, while obviously, much better if you have seen Breaking Bad, you can watch Better Call Saul and never have seen Breaking Bad, and you will still be involved in the story and deeply moved by what's happening. There are references and echoes and hints of what's to come in Breaking Bad, but the truth is a spin-off has to stand on its own. So the answer is, if you want to write a spin-off because it's a cool standing story, do it. Why not? If you like writing, that's good. I am so excited this happened to me today by mistake. I was writing this as a 5th episode of the original pilot when I realized it would be better on its own. Can't connect. Great. That's good. 5th episode of the original pilot, by the way. The pilot is the 1st episode. An original series could have a 5th episode. But do remember that if you are writing multiple episodes of a series that you want to sell, you are essentially deeply committing to a thing that may not go. And if it doesn't go, how will you feel if you have written 5 of them? It's like writing 5 original screenplays and then they all get thrown out as a group. Sometimes it's better to write new stuff. But on the other hand, since you clearly are into it and having a good time, cool. That's pretty damn great. And I say yes. Okay. So, all right. I will answer Mad Money questions in the Mad Money live stream that I will do one day. What's easier to write, a TV pilot or a feature? Different. A TV pilot is obviously shorter. A feature is twice the length of an hour-long pilot. And so therefore, it's just easier to write less than more. But a feature is easier to write in some ways because you're writing the ending. And therefore, you are telling a story beginning, middle, and end. And that the knowing the end and writing the end makes the questions and answers that you have to create a script out of easier to answer. In other words, if you are okay, Hunter, you got to slow down. You got to slow down. Too many questions. Okay. But the answer is, I believe that every good story, you have to answer these 6 essential questions, if you remember. And honestly, you can write a great story without it, but it helps if you are asking these questions. Here's the thing. That last couple of questions is about how it resolves. And a pilot resolves with the end of the pilot, but it doesn't end the story. In fact, very often it's just the bare beginning of the story. So therefore, it is often difficult to write a pilot because you're just scraping the surface of the character. And when you do that, it's very, for me at least, it's very hard to write about a character or a story if you don't know where it's going. And so for me, having the ending set, which you do in a feature, makes features easier than pilots. On the other hand, pilots are in some ways easier because they're shorter and got less going. Absolutely. The answer is absolutely. You gotta assume that somebody reading this script has never heard of the original. Okay. So I'm going to briefly take some time here to work on this. Here's the thing about this. So I've got this scene. You know what I think I'm going to do is I am going to start. I am going to go here. I'm going to duplicate this. See, I am making this version of the script. I'm calling it the text George open, just to tell myself this is the part where we spend time with George in the opening. Then I'm going to 7, 14, 22. Okay, now I am going to open a new copy of the script. Oh, look at that. Way too big. Okay. And I'm going to work in that so I don't throw away all that great work. Remember how I said how cool it was that I finally got that scene to work? It is really bad to do, like, I've suddenly thought of this new concept of a scene. What if I'm wrong? Don't ever, ever delete or trash a copy of a script which you're going to rewrite. Save it. Put it in an archive. Keep it so that if... Here we go. Take this and put it in my archive of text drafts. Okay, now we're going to work from the text, but I have not thrown away this scene I got right. If one day I think, I wonder if that scene is wrong, I can get back to it and check it and maybe go back to using it. That happens. All right, let's see where we are. Hey, Ches, good to see you. And Kenny, I am so glad that I'm helping you. That is great. Thank you. Okay. Natasha is writing multiple episodes of the original series for audio drama. Oh, cool. I know I could have started the pilot, but I loved it so much and great responses to it. You know, that's great. Go. That is, I'm not going to say don't write it. Just so important to get it out there any way we can. That is the truth from Natasha, spoken absolutely. The most important thing that all of us can do is write what we see in our heads and keep writing it. Keep writing new scripts. Keep following your passion. That is absolutely cool. Not a problem. Also, Hunter, I urge you to ask the questions in the comments. Ask the questions in the comments, or you can contact me within reason. I will try and answer questions at writingforscreens.com. Contact me. That is another way that you can ask questions. But the main thing is I'm happy to answer. I just don't want to answer too many in a row without actually doing some of the work here. Okay, cool. All right, so now here's the thing. This scene, I'm going to try and imagine this scene and say, how can I get, the thing I need to get in is that he's eating or drinking, and that he's, and then he's going to, now, is it going to be too on the nose? Is it going to be too on the nose about this poisoning thing? Like, should this be something he listens, that other people are listening to? So the very thing that I solved when I wrote this scene is going to maybe no longer the solution if the scene is changing. Because the original idea of the scene was that he doesn't die in this scene. He dies in the 2 scenes later. Thank you, Natasha. Okay, so what we've got here is, it too on the nose to have him describing the poisoning as he gets poisoned? My instinct is, yeah. Let's see. I'm thinking for the moment, it would be I really think it's too on the nose. What I'm going to do here here's the thing. Is George a smoothie type or is it coffee? Because I kind of think it's coffee. I mean, smoothies, just, it's more distinctive visually, but that's a very contemporary, George is an old guy from the old world. But you thought it was a cool gimmick about the description? That's the thing, it could be. Still not written. That's okay. Either is mine. Mine isn't written either. We are writing. We are going through the process. taking it step by step. If you are writing, then it's good. If your characters are wilding and you're not sure what they're up to yet, that's okay. I would once again suggest, I always do, check out this video, Why Outline. If you don't have an outline, these are good videos to help with that, getting those characters wrangled a little bit. Okay, so okay. I don't need to say half finished. He's taking a deep swig. That's all we need. All right. All right, that's good. Okay. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Hold on a second. Did Easter 10 times in one summer. There we go. So, it's interesting. Someone who society doesn't care about, like George, has esoteric interests. The fact that he has esoteric interests would make society not care about him. I think that's fair. I would love a very large margarita, Javier. Thank you so much. I appreciate the offer. For the moment, I'm going to leave the description. Now the question is, does he actually die while he's saying it? Because if he says it, like right now, he's signing off. He's stopping the recorder. Let's get rid of all this. All right. I'm going to have to really rethink the structure of this scene. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. All right. It seems like in many movies, there's TV shows, etc., there's a point where one character tells the story of another character who has the same goal as the main character in the movie. E.g., the story of Brunhilde in Diego Unchanged. Where does that tool? I would say that tool comes from the fact that it's cool. Basically, the idea that you would tell a story within a story, which is, if you're telling a story within a story and that story is evocative or illuminating on your main story, it's just a good way to kind of hook the audience in. Also, people like stories. So therefore, it's just a thing. First of all, it's a thing that characters would do. Very often people in stories tell stories to each other because they're trying to get something or make an impact on those other characters. So it's a way of getting to them. So yeah, that's just it. It's just a great trick. It's like when somebody tells a joke and the joke is revealing. There are certain forms of ways people talk to each other, and if you can put that within your story, it's just a beautiful little flourish. So yeah. Inciting incidents. Should it be used to motivate the protagonist, or is it simply the obstacle that affects the world the protagonist in? I don't see how it can not motivate the protagonist. Even if it affects the world the protagonist in, the thing that you want to do, by the way, hi MegaMayo, I don't think I've ever spoken to you before, is even whether or not it affects the whole world, it has to affect the protagonist. The whole point of an inciting incident, and I have done a whole video on the inciting incident, which you should check out. because I go into some detail about this. But the idea of an inciting incident is it's something that makes the main character start doing things specifically to get a goal, a specific goal, to get the story started. Now, as I say in the video, that could actually happen before the movie begins or the show begins. That's not actually unusual to have the inciting incident happen before the story starts. Then you're just catching up as you go along. Other times, you'll sort of establish certain things about the character and then have something happen either to them directly or in their world, but it has to motivate the protagonist. Yeah. I'm trying to really think about is there any case where the inciting incident doesn't motivate the protagonist? I'd say no. No. At very worst, the inciting incident there could be like a ripple effect. Like if the inciting incident is that somebody is going to get drafted, and so the inciting incident is that the war gets declared, and then the government decides to draft soldiers, and then the main character gets drafted, it's kind of a long way around to say that's the inciting incident. The inciting incident is really getting the draft notice, is getting drafted. But anyway, the answer is, as far as I can tell, the inciting incident is the thing that stirs the main character to take action. That's the definition of it. Any other thing, while interesting and powerful and not necessarily something you should cut, but it's not inciting the story. Inciting is about inciting, provoking, beginning the story. So therefore, that's I don't think there's a way to have like, for instance, you say simply the obstacle that affects the world the protagonist is in. The obstacle would be an obstacle to something, and that something is what the protagonist wants, and the appearance of the obstacle would be the inciting incident. For instance, main character wants to go to college and become a lawyer, and sue the government for destroying the environment. COVID closes the schools and they don't get to go to college that year. That's the obstacle. Now, what are they going to do? Are they going to do something else which is going to teach them a different way to follow that path instead of going to college? Or are they going to get their education some other way? Or, the appearance of the obstacle can be the motivating incident. Okay. Does odd expression not also equal? Yes, it does. That's definitely not yet written well enough. Curious indeed. The framing device. Yeah, that's another name for when somebody has a story within a story, or tells a story within a story. It's a device. It's a technique. It's a way of telling stories by sometimes somebody will read a book or sometimes look at a picture book and you see just the pictures, or sometimes any art within the art is just a cool thing to do, and so we often like to see those. Okay, so we're getting to the end of the hour, and I think I'm going to say I will see you all tomorrow, where we're going to take on this scene more, because it's I have to completely rethink this scene to compress 3 scenes into 1. That's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. Until then, go write something.